So, like, identity is, like, a crazy broad topic, and it's really hard to pinpoint, and it's not, like, specific to one person.
Right.
Yeah, and I feel like you can also have group identities and individual identities. Like,
Right.
they can be super broad, but they're also, like, so personal. So, like, I don't know, for example, like, if I find someone who listens to, like, a musical artist that I like, I immediately feel connected with them because I feel like, you know, that my music taste is, like, a big part of my identity. And so, even though it's, like, super personal to me, I'm like, oh, that's so cool that, like, they also enjoy the same things that I enjoy, you know? And I don't know, I find that it's, like, very easy to connect with people when you find, like, those little niche things that you have in common.
Because I think it's such a general thing, but it can be so unique, and so it can be a way of connecting with others, which is so interesting and really cool.
And I feel like definitely, like, we're all college students. Like, I've noticed that I have very different identities from everyone else, and it's not something you can really, like, compare between people, but that's also, like, the whole point of identity is that you can learn from other people and kind of embrace the differences between it, but also you can find people different with different backgrounds and different identities as you, and also find people with more similar things that you can compare with.
Yeah, because, like, identity is just this kind of thing where everything, your entire life experience and all the little things that make you can form your identity, but it's also the people around you and how you interact with them and how they interact with you and your identity and how they perceive you and how they treat you that can also mold your identity.
People have very broad identities, you know, like their nationality or, like, where they're from, but then they also have very unique identities, like, I don't know, they pour milk before their cereal, which makes them a psycho, but that's, like, part of their identity. Like, you know, those, like, individual things, like, little quirks about people. And so I feel like once you figure out, like, a combination of those things, then you kind of, you know, figure out someone's, like, true identity or, like, how to know them on a deeper level. Alright, hello everyone, and welcome back to this week's episode of Boston's Art Includes Us. We are your hosts, Ashley,
Talia,
Sarah,
And Sophia, we're so glad that you're joining us.
this week we are unveiling identity, exploring culture and belonging in art.
we will be discussing how we as an audience find pieces of ourselves and our identity through art and how artists can incorporate their own identity into art.
To do this, it may be helpful to talk about identity and what it means to each person. It's also important to mention that there are different types of identity. Identity can be personal, interpersonal, cultural, and basically whatever else identity means to you.
Right. And I think that there can also be identity that can be part of your personal identity, but more ties into culture, birthplace, values, etc.
I think what's important to remember is that in art, there's both the viewer's perspective and the artist's. Art can be very specific with a message in mind, or it can be abstract and more up to the audience's interpretation.
Artists can use their art to communicate to their audience or relate to them. If a viewer can identify with a piece, it will strengthen their connection to the work or message.
Specifically, we will be discussing States of Being by Yu and Wu and Breathe Life Together by Rob Pro Black Gibbs.
Alright, so I'm Sophia.
And I'm Sarah.
So, States of Being by Yu and Wu. It's at the Institute of Contemporary Art. Yu and Wu won the James and Austrie Foster Prize of 2023. She got her own room at the exhibition. And as you walk in, you see all of her different pieces in this room. So Sarah, tell me about your experience at the ICA visiting States of Being.
For me, I really liked how all of her pieces were separate but like connected in the sort that like I could see elements of each, like some of the media and some of the materials that she used from piece to piece was clearly the same, but they were used in a different way. And I really liked how there was connection between not only like within the pieces but between the pieces.
Yeah, it felt very cohesive.
Yeah.
Like the entire room, for sure. She uses very similar materials within her pieces. In States of Being specifically, she uses porcelain, stone, dried lotus leaves, found wood, and red string.
And I think that, like, the way that she uses, like, the same color palette really ties it together, because I saw a lot of red and gold and black and white and just, like, simple colors where red and gold were the accent colors, and there wasn't a lot of other colors to be, like, distracting almost.
Yeah, for sure. So, States of Being, as you walk into the room, it's on this white wall, and there's lots of different objects that are on the white wall. They're either just attached to the wall or on a shelf, and they're clearly very carefully arranged in such a way that the viewer's eye is guided throughout the piece. There's this red string that also guides the viewer's eye, and a very important aspect of States of Being is that every single object displayed has been changed or transformed in some way. And Yuan Wu is, a lot of her work is about immigration and migration, because she was born in Taipei but moved to the US at a very young age.
Yeah. And I think that for me, like, the piece is like a very mixed media piece with, like, several different components, and when you first walk into the room, it might be a little confusing how this one, like, piece is one work of art, as it's, like, spread across, like, a whole span of a wall, but, like, the red string and there's little torn up pieces of paper that kind of, like, flow through it, and you kind of see how each of the elements are tied together in some way, and it kind of takes your eyes on a journey through the piece.
Yeah, for sure. I see that.
I think that there's, like, a lot about her art specifically, but art in general, that talks about, like, how culture can be tied into it, and you're finding not only your own identity but cultural identity through a work of art as both the artist and the viewer. And having these fragments, I feel like, were really a way of showing that, like, different pieces, like almost like a puzzle, work together to show one image, but more like one person.
Sure, because, like, all of the objects, like you mentioned before, like, they're, like, separate, and if the red string wasn't there to kind of connect them together, you might not even be able to tell that it's one piece and not a bunch of different separate pieces put together. For sure, I can see that. So how did you, when you first saw the piece, how did you connect? Did you in any way connect with it, or how did it strike you? What were you thinking about?
I think I really liked how it wasn't just, like, one type of work. So it was also, like, it's 2D and 3D, so it really, like, attracts the viewer. And I saw the ceramic bowl, which was, like, repaired with that's a style of Japanese art of, like, restoration. And I'm half Japanese, so I really, I saw that and that kind of drew my eyes in, and then I, like, continued to look at the piece. But I thought it was interesting how this piece is called States of Being, and it's about how things can be transformed but also put back together, and learning more about Yuan Wu and how she has the struggles of culture and assimilation, and the battle of not wanting to lose her past identity by moving here, but also wanting to, like, get used to and be comfortable in the US was, like, a very, like, interesting battle, and you can almost, like, feel the tension through the red string in this piece.
So it, like, kind of, you had this, like, personal connection to it. That's interesting. I also did see that similar and different. What struck me was the types of changes and transformation that I saw the objects undergo. one of these changes that, like, between the two types of changes that I observed were, like, fundamental changes that, like, completely change the essence of an object, and it can't, like, return to the original form that it was before. Like that, the ripped up and crumpled up pieces of paper that you mentioned, you can't undo that. That's like a change that's gonna remain forever, you know? And then there's also changes to the way that we perceive the objects. Like, one of the pieces of paper, there's this transparent tracing paper over it, with all these gold details. But if you really observe it, if you removed that tracing paper, the original white piece of paper remains the same. There's actually no... The actual piece of paper didn't change. It's just how we perceive it that changes. And what I think that's going on is that these represent two different types of changes that people undergo when they are assimilating to a new culture, right? You do, of course, change and you grow because that's a normal part of life,
Right.
especially if you're in a different culture that can be exacerbated. But the way that you're perceived can also change because you're in a new culture, and the things that make you aren't, like, the same to other people. They're different now. Like, it's a differentiator. So of course the way that you're perceived is going to change.
Yeah. I think that's a really, like, cool and, like, unique take on it, that it kind of shows you how, like, art can have, like, several meanings, and it's not all, like, single tone, but, like, it depends on how you as the viewer are, like, taking the time and understanding it.
Yeah, of course. I think partly the reason why I saw this is because I was thinking, because I just moved to the US from Brazil, I was thinking about these kind of things a lot. You know, the way that I'm changing and the way that I'm perceived is changing. So I did really connect with the piece in that sense. Especially just, I guess, the timing of when I went to see it. It's something I was thinking about a lot, you know. Interestingly enough, I thought that my experience as, like, an international kid, being, like, a dual citizen, having an American mom, not having a very strong accent, wasn't gonna be as I wasn't going to have that experience as much as I am having. Like, the culture shock or whatever wasn't going to be as big, but I have been having these experiences of where people are like, I don't know, the way that they treat me, the way that they perceive me changes and has been changing way more than I expected, I guess.
Yeah.
There is, like, a lot of fear of, like, not only representing your country, but also losing this connection to your country, because you are changing and that's normal. But because if you're taken out of that environment and you start changing, there is this fear that you're gonna, like, change outside and, like, of the, like, cultural confinements that you're used to, and then therefore, like, lose like that connection to your culture.
Yeah.
But I do feel like States of Being is not only a reminder to the viewer, but also to Yuan Wu herself,
Right.
that's changing doesn't have to be a bad thing, especially, like, with that the kitsungi.
Yeah.
I think that method of turning something that is broken beautiful.
Yeah.
There's all these, like, there's this beauty in this piece that I think is a reminder to all of us that change doesn't have to be a bad thing, and change is okay, and it's a normal part of being human.
Right, and I think that the states of being, like, change is what you just said. Change is natural, and it's literally part of the human, like, experience. It's something that should actually happen, and, like, finding a way to embrace it and not hide it or reject it is really important to that growth and that assimilation and, like, having that understanding can help to almost maintain your past identity in a small sense. And then there's still always, I think, that internal struggle and the battle between it. But it like has a small, hopefully plays a small part in allowing that to be easier.
Hi, I'm Talia.
And I'm Ashley.
And the second piece that we are analyzing and want to talk about today is Breathe Life Together. And this was made in 2022, and it's located in Dewey Square in Rose Kennedy Greenway, right in front of South Station. The artist is Rob Pro Black Gibbs, and we looked into some of his other works in class. So it's pretty much a mural, and it covers an entire wall in Dewey Square. And it pictures his daughter squatting in a tracksuit with a hat, and there's a stereo in the background. There's also a golden dome over the head. And Ashley, I was just kind of wondering, how did you interact and experience this work when you visited it?
It was honestly very unique because I've never really experienced such like a large scale mural before, so it was cool that you could see it from far away and then also like notice more of the details as you got closer. And it's also cool because it's on the Greenway, there's sort of like this little lawn area where people can like come and sit down, or like, yeah, if you want to, you can go up and touch it. So it's like a little bit more unique than just like seeing a piece in like a curated museum exhibit. So that part was really cool. And it's also very interesting because she's like staring straight at you. So like when you walk and see the mural for the first time, you're like making direct eye contact with her, which in my experience made me feel a lot more connected to the piece. Like I was like, you know, also in this like relationship with the artist and the piece. And so that was pretty cool.
Yeah, definitely. I did notice that with like the eyes, it kind of brings in the spectators, and it's such a large space, so it kind of, even though a mural is up and everyone kind of views it like ahead of them, it still kind of incorporates a sort of interaction by having the daughter that's pictured in this mural kind of like staring at the viewers and almost calling for their attention, like, look at me, look at this grand piece that's pretty much like in front of this entire skyline.
Yeah, and I think it makes a big difference that like she's looking straight out and like making direct eye contact with the viewer instead of just like looking off to the side, because I noticed that like the piece had a lot to do with like representation and making sure that like Black voices were heard. And so I thought that part was really cool, and I think he did a great job of like not only drawing your eye to the piece because it is such like a big mural, but also, you know, making sure that his culture was represented through like the articles of clothing that she was wearing, and the stereo was his grandmother's, which I think is like a really cool detail. And like when I got closer, I realized that so much detail was put into it, because if you look at the stereo, there's like a tape in there, you know, that has like an actual song from his childhood that he loved. And so noticing all of those details also made it a lot easier to connect with and like think about like family and like my experience with music. Like I don't know if like music is a big thing for your family or not, but you know, that's something that has definitely like sort of connected my family.
Yeah, definitely. I remember like when I was younger, a big part of my identity was going in car rides with my family, and like honestly the music that my parents would play for me and my sisters is the music I still listen to now, like different 90s and 2000s songs from car rides. So I think that's really interesting. And you mentioned how like the stereo was the grandmother's, but the daughter is squatting in front of the stereo in this tracksuit. So I think that's a really interesting way to like tie in personal identity and different traditions through the family, because it kind of incorporates all different generations and tradition to make someone whole. Their identity comes from generations before, and also like plays into your current identity. So I found that really interesting.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, and like something that I noticed after when I was sort of like reflecting on my experience and looking into their artwork more is like, because of all those little details, like, you know, the stereo is very clearly something that's older, you know, so like someone from an older generation would be able to like walk past this mural and be like, oh my god, that's so cool, like my mom had that, or like I used to have that same stereo, you know. And same thing with like the pieces of clothing that she's wearing. Like I feel like all those little details make it easy for like people of all generations to connect with the piece. Everyone has family, and everyone's family is like very important to them, so to see, you know, I guess such a beautiful depiction of like family and like generational connections is really, really cool. And yeah, I was reading about the use of like the gold color a little bit, because that was something that like when I went, I just didn't really think about it all. And then I went back to look at it and I was like, there's like a golden dome over her head. And so you know, I was looking into that a little bit more, and that part was really cool as well, that it's sort of like, you know, bringing focus to the fact that like she's so valuable in his life.
Right. And I think like that golden dome really like plays on the part that he's kind of like, this mural is kind of bringing light and attention to his daughter, but also just to like her identity with obviously her clothing and her culture identity. And I think even within the location, he's pretty much just bringing attention to Black voices that are often like underrepresented. And I feel like the way that he depicts this with the daughter with this halo over her head, and it's such a beautiful sight in this area, really draws attention in giving her a voice and giving viewers a way to really like look at this and appreciate what's in front of them.
Yeah, and I think it's cool to think about, because the like, you have like this giant building that's rectangular, and then there's like this weird little part that's like a semicircle, which is a little bit strange. And he was sort of talking about how like he didn't know what he was going to do with that, you know. And then I feel like, you know, because that was such like an explicit choice to like put the golden dome over her head, like it's not in the original picture, you know, so it was something that he wanted to include like in the mural. I feel like it's also very unique, and it was like a very deliberate choice for him to like have sort of put the sun over her head instead of like the stereo, because he also was focused on like how important it is to share that Boston is like an incredible place to raise someone, you know. And yeah, sort of like you were saying, like hope for the future generations, and you know, yeah, valuing your family and everyone that comes after you.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, we're switching it up a little bit for this last section. So I have Sophia with me now, and I know you missed us, so we're back again. You're welcome. And we're going to be talking about identity and a little bit about how the two pieces connect. So take it away, girl.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think one of the most interesting things about when artists use identity and talk about their own identity in art is that it's a very personal piece. Both of the pieces that we talked about today are very personal to the artist's identity, but they also can and do, like, viewers connect to these pieces, and they're able to connect to them. And even if they don't connect to them based on the similarities within their identities, viewers can find bits and pieces that resonate with them, or that they just find moving. Like, even if they're like, I don't connect with this piece, as in I don't relate to it, but it moves me because that's part of what art is.
Right. Yeah, like personally, I don't understand what it's like to be an immigrant and having, you know, moved countries. Like, that's just not something that I've ever experienced in my life, but I can still, identify with like bits and pieces of states of being. And even if it's not like directly identifying, like as in I relate, it's like, it's just a very moving piece. Like, it's easy to be affected by it because, you know, it is so personal to the artist, and you kind of get like this unique view into like how her mind works and like her own experiences with that. And like the same thing with Breathe Life Together. Like, obviously I don't have any children, you know, but I can very much identify with, you know, how important family is to me and other people, and how important like being proud of where you come from is, and being proud of like your hometown. And I feel like, like it's just something that's very easy for a lot of people to identify with, even if you don't identify, you know, with like the exact experiences.
Yeah, one of my favorite things about art is that there's no rules.
Mm-hmm.
So the way that you interpret it, you don't have to interpret it the same way that the artist intended it to be. You can understand it and view it however you want, and however it best, you know, connects to you and how you know, understand it. And like me and Sarah, we understood, and we analyzed states of being differently, and we connected to it differently because our backgrounds are different and our experiences and lived experiences are different, and we're different people.
Yeah, exactly. And I feel like that's something that's so unique about it, is like you can put a bunch of different people in front of the same art piece and every single person will have a different experience with that piece, you know, which is definitely something we've been talking a lot about in class.
Yeah. So I guess artists can both, you know, make these pieces that are super personal, but are able to connect with multiple people across multiple backgrounds and identities. And
yeah, and it's just, yeah, in a very, very cool way, because you get like this visual depiction of kind of complicated topics, and it helps you like understand yourself and other people better.
Thank you so much for joining us this week on another episode to talk about unveiling identity in art. Join us next week for a deep dive on public art for another episode of Boston Art Includes Us. This was Sarah,
Sophia,
Talia,
And Ashley.
Bye.